Hello again. This is number 5 in my series of lazy man's or woman's guide to going faster on a bike. So I mentioned in my first video that these tips are designed to try and make you faster without actually being any fitter. In this video I want to talk to you about aerodynamics and how that can make you faster on a bike. So here's a bit of background. Up until 4 or 5 years ago, my training was basically focused on improving my FTP as a way of making myself faster on the bike. But as I was getting older, I was struggling to achieve the same FTP numbers every year, and in fact it was actually starting to go down. Even though I felt like I was training as hard or possibly even harder than in previous years, I couldn't get my FTP to go up any higher. But at about the same time, I knew somebody who was doing some wind tunnel testing, and I got some tips from him and tried them out and found that they actually worked, to the extent that I was actually going faster than ever, even though my FTP was going lower. And in my 60th year, I actually set PBs at 10, 25, 50 and 100 mile time trials. I won 2 Welsh titles and qualified second in the UK to go to the World Championships. And I've put this down to changes in my aerodynamics, making small improvements that made quite a difference to how fast I could go through the air. Things like my position on the bike, changes to the bike itself, and the kit that I wore, stuff like that. Before I give away all of my secrets, I'm going to give you some technical information, so I hope you're paying attention for this. Okay, so when you ride through the air, you're subject to aerodynamic drag, and the faster you go through the air, the more drag you're subjected to. The drag itself is made up of 2 components, air pressure drag and surface friction. Air pressure drag is when you pass through the air pressure changes at different points around your body. In this photograph, the red areas show high pressure areas and the blue low pressure areas. The hole you make in the air with your body and bike is filled by air flowing around you. The turbulence caused and pressure differences in the air cause air pressure drag. In this photograph you can see the turbulence caused by this computer generated image. Surface friction is where the air in contact with the surface is being slowed down as it passes over you. So things like clothing, helmet, the bike, even hairs on your legs and arms all cause surface friction and all slow you down. So wearing close-fitting clothing, riding an aero bike with aero wheels can reduce drag. On average, equipment and clothing accounts for around 20 to 30% of total drag. So before you go out and blow a load of cash on aero kit and waxing, you may want to pause and wonder where the other 70 to 80% of drag comes from. And it actually comes from you, the rider. So one of the most important factors to reduce drag is to reduce your frontal area. Frontal area is basically the size of the hole that you're trying to make through the air as you ride along. Here's a photograph showing different hand positions on the bike, and you can see the difference it makes to the rider's frontal area. As I mentioned earlier, drag increases the faster you go through the air. So, for example, at 10 miles an hour, around 50% of the power that you put down through the pedals is just to overcome air resistance. But at 30 miles an hour, this becomes 90%. So the faster you want to ride, the more you need to think about aerodynamics. I've got a video here which shows some different positions on the bike and how aerodynamics are affected. This first position is what I call on the bars. Basically you're gripping the handlebars either side of the stem. It's an ideal position for climbing because it allows you to sit up, stretch your back, expand your chest, get some deep breaths, and at the same time, if you're going uphill, you're not really compromising your aerodynamics. But you notice how upright I'm sitting on the bike. So in terms of frontal area, other than being in a standing position, this has the largest frontal area exposed to the wind. In this position, if you were an average size rider wearing typical cycle clothing, riding along at a steady 150 watts on a flat road with no wind, you would go at around 15 to 16 miles an hour. This next position is on the hoods. This is where the majority of riders spend the majority of their time when riding. It's a comfortable position and you've got full control of your brakes and gears. You can see when you compare it to the previous position that my head position is lower, and that means that my frontal area has been reduced. So I'm going to have a slightly more aerodynamic profile. In this position, your 150 watts under the same conditions as I mentioned before would give you around 16 to 17 miles an hour. The next position is on the drops. This is a position that some people might use from time to time if they're feeling racy. But my experience from being out on the road, watching riders, doing bike fits, is that a lot of people don't use this position, either because they don't have the flexibility, it feels uncomfortable, feels too low, maybe they don't feel that they have full control over the bike. But in this position you can see my head position is lower again, and so my frontal area is also lower. So for 150 watts you could be going at 17 to 19 miles an hour. The last position is one you might see in professional bike races, but it's not a very safe position to ride on a road bike, so I wouldn't recommend it to you. However, it is similar to a position that somebody might have on tri-bars or on a time trial bike. You can see that my head is lower, my torso has a flatter angle, and in this position at 150 watts you could be doing 19 to 21 miles an hour. So between the first and the last positions I've just shown you, you can get as much as a 6 mile an hour increase in speed for the same effort. Here's a summary table showing that those differences in speed for the same effort level. Here's another table that shows what wattage you might have to generate to do 20 miles an hour. And you can see between riding on the bars, the least aerodynamic position, to riding on tri-bars, you could have to generate 80 watts more power to go at the same speed. 80 watts is a massive difference, but as you go faster this differential becomes even more. If you added in an aero bike frame, wheels, tight-fitting clothing, aero helmet, you could be looking at another 1 to 2 miles an hour increase in speed. But by far the biggest increase in speed is going to be given to you by your position on the bike. So what you need to do to get aerodynamic and faster? Firstly, being able to get into a more aero position on the bike requires a fair degree of flexibility and also training. Stretching and flexibility exercises could enable you to reduce your frontal area by being able to get lower and therefore increase your speed. Trying to reduce your frontal area and getting lower on a bike is never going to be very comfortable, but the more time you spend training in that position, the easier it becomes. But there is a point where getting into an extreme position can have a detrimental effect. For example, if your leg movements or breathing are restricted, it might affect your power output, so you could end up actually going slower. So here's a summary of how to get faster by getting aero. Think about your body position on the bike. Keep your elbows tucked in. Try and keep your knees close to the top tube. Having your knees going out at all different angles and riding with a wide elbow stance like this is just catching more air. So you want to try and keep as compact as possible. You can drop your head between your shoulders. That reduces your frontal area a little bit. And then think about your kit. If you've got a baggy flapping jacket on or unzipped tops, it could be like wearing a parachute on your back. And when you're going downhill or into a headwind, then get onto the drops. Usually you can tell when it's time to get onto the drops when the wind noise picks up. But at any speed over, say 10 miles an hour, you would definitely get an advantage from being in a lower position. You might only be doing 10 miles an hour, but if you're going into a 15 miles an hour headwind, that's effectively a 25 mile an hour speed that you're going at through the wind. So I think that just about covers it. Remember that in a race situation, even the smallest gains can make a difference. 2 years ago I won the Welsh 10 mile time trial championship by 1 second. This equates to me being 0.02 of a mile an hour faster than the guy in second place. If you can convert that to watts, you're talking about around 0.3 of a watt. That's a minute difference, and it could just have been because I shaved a bit of my legs between the top of my calf guard and the bottom of my skin suit. So, get the razors out, boys and girls, and go faster. Bye for now.